Dak Prescott and George Pickens had a monster performance at Minicamp. We'll break it down next.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me over on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. You can also check me out over on the Locked On Dynasty Football podcast. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. And on today's show, we are breaking down the first practice from Dallas Cowboys minicamp. They're only going to have two. There's a walkthrough on Thursday. I wouldn't be surprised if that gets canceled. So pretty light minicamp. But let's talk about some of the positives coming out of that minicamp. And again, no hitting, no pads. It's pretty toned down. But one of the things that we saw from several different beat reporters who were at practice was that the Dak Prescott and George Pickens connection was active. I think Pickens caught every single target that he had during the team period. And actually, Landon, I was going to say, I wrote a piece for FanSided on Tuesday where if you're going to be optimistic about the Cowboys going forward into the season, it's because this passing game has a chance to be elite. And if it's going to be elite, it's going to need Pickens to be a star as the number 2 receiver.
Yeah.
So far, seems like the drumbeat's been pretty solid.
Yeah, it has. And I think, I'm not shocked. I mean, again, like we talked about the fact that all eyes are facing in the same direction, right? Everybody's on the same page, at least for the Cowboys, about getting George Pickens a new deal and getting him a lot of production this season in order to secure that new deal. So I wouldn't be shocked to see if we find out Dak has, spent a lot of time with Pickens between OTAs and mini camps and any of the off time that they've got, because I think that everybody is invested in kind of making this work. So it's when Dak is invested in trying to make a wide receiver work. I remember when CD got drafted, right? Like Dak accelerates that program very quickly, and he becomes comfortable with the receivers quickly. Otherwise, it can kind of take some time. If you're just kind of naturally in the rotation of things, it can take Dak a little bit of time before he starts to feel fully comfortable with you. But when there's situations like this where a high priority playmaker comes into the offense, and Dak really has the opportunity to kind of lock in with that particular person, they can develop a chemistry very quickly, and it appears that is exactly what has happened with George Pickens so far.
It's funny with Dak because there are receivers where he just instantly has a connection with. Like,
that's true.
I think about Amari Cooper. Like Amari Cooper's first game, he had like 50 yards and a touchdown, and then the next week he had a monster game, and Amari put up some huge numbers in the second half of that 2018 season.
Yeah,
like it took no time at all. But with somebody like Brandon Cooks, like it took a little bit, and even at the end of it, it was a struggle. So I think there is some of these guys that he just naturally works with really well.
Well, and I think a lot of it has to do with it being a kind of match to the type of player he likes to throw to. I mean, that's one of the things that we talked about with the Pickens signing, the trade, is that Pickens really does look like a supersized version of Michael Gallup, who was a guy that Dak really loved to throw the ball to, supersized in the sense that he's a more athletic, a little bit longer. He's not necessarily any bigger. He probably weighs 10 pounds less while being 3 inches taller,
It's just that his catch radius is absurd. Yeah.
And I think that's one of the archetypes of receiver that Dak likes to focus his throws to, right? Is the bigger, wide catch radius guy that can get down the field. And Dak doesn't need to like place it into his basket while he's running full speed. He can get it up high and down the field so the guy can make a play on it. That's the kind of the deep ball receiver that Dak likes to throw the ball to. So I think that's part of the reason as well that Dak is kind of developing this chemistry quickly, is that he really is naturally the kind of receiver that Dak likes to throw the ball to.
There was a note from Tommy Yarish on Twitter, who works for DallasCowboys.com. He said, nobody could guard George Pickens today. He beat Israel Mukuamu on a nasty comeback. I'll get to that in a second. And had a couple more catches on the day, too. He went 5 for 5 on targets. You can tell that he and Dak Prescott are starting to get more comfortable with one another. There was also another route where CeeDee Lamb was the primary receiver, and Dak held on to him for a little bit and then shifted to Pickens, who was the secondary receiver, for a big gain down the middle of the field. I wanted to just talk about that comeback route really quickly, because this is something that we saw a lot in Pittsburgh. Because he is such a good deep threat,
Yep.
and he's so physical at the line of scrimmage, even though he's not the most polished against press, you see a lot of corners give him space, and he can drive up the field and then quickly gear down and come back for those comeback routes. You can get 7-8 yards, whatever you want, running those routes.
Yeah, I mean, that's when you have guys that are true deep threats, they have to be able to run that secondary route well. And I think that's some of the problems that you've seen with previous guys that come out of college that don't make it, right? Is that, yeah, of course they could run a 9 route down the field and get behind a defense, but can they run that comeback route, which is ultimately the constraint for the deep pass, right? And it makes you a sort of not a complete receiver, but at least you have a game where you can beat a corner with his.
You're not a one-trick pony, right?
Yeah, and then use that fear against him to run a comeback and create a simple yardage, shorter down the field. So, and I think the other thing I'll throw in there too is that Pickens is a really good slant runner. And that's going to be really important as well, because that's another route that Dak likes to throw. So, yeah, I mean, look, big throws down the field or something, obviously, to big bodies that we just talked about. What's the other throw that we know that Dak absolutely loves to throw? The comeback, a hook route, these in-breaking routes back to the quarterback. And if Pickens can create space for himself with his big body, maybe a slight push off at the top of the route, and then a little bit of fear because of the threat to go deep. That's going to make his opportunities in those hook routes even greater for Dak.
Yeah, we'll see what his effect is, his impact is as a deep threat receiver. That's just never been Dak's greatest strength. But I think one of the ways that Pickens could be a lot better in Dallas is because of these comeback routes. Like, when you play with Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, Mason Rudolph, Kenny Pickett, I can keep going. All those guys are going to throw comeback routes a little differently. The beat's going to be a little bit different. Where they put the ball, some are going to put it more on the outside where you're away from trouble. Some are going to be willing to put it a little bit more on the inside shoulder to try to get it to you as quicker. I wouldn't be surprised if that's where Pickens and Dak's bread and butter ends up being this year.
Well, some of them are not even accurate enough to get to choose where that ball is going to be delivered. They're just hoping delivered within a yard of the guy, right? So,
and sometimes it's a tick late, and that can be the difference in the ball getting there or not. Pickens does a really good job of gearing down and coming back to the football. I still think he can get better in that area, but if I had to pick one spot where I think Dak and Pickens are going to do really well, it's that specific route.
Yeah, and I think that, like I said, the combination of those two things make him a threat by himself to beat man coverage every single time, because you have to account for both sides of his game, and that whole sideline is going to be his weapon.
Last thing on Dak, went 17 of 19 in the team drills. Don't care about the numbers, but it sounds like he was really sharp. And again, the fact that he's even out there throwing 20 passes in a minicamp shows that we're in a pretty good spot with his health going into the offseason.
That was certainly a concern, and that we should account for the fact that, Dak's out there slinging it. They're not really holding him back. All signs are positive in his health situation.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the defensive backs. Did we have some surprise defensive back performances over at minicamp? We'll discuss that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there has never been a better time to get in on the action. And FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. You guys know that I've been backing the Oklahoma City Thunder. I'm going to continue to do that. You can go check out the series lines over on FanDuel. Also, go check out the MVP odds. I think there's some really good value there, especially on a certain shooting guard for the Oklahoma City Thunder. And if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head over to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. And if it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets and make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are continuing to break down all of the news and notes coming out of minicamp. Landon, let's talk about the defensive backs. They're a pretty depleted group right now because of all the injuries, right? But one name that continues to shine, not only in minicamps, but through OTAs, Kaiir Elam. Sounds like he's having a really strong offseason.
It does. I mean, I'm pretty sure a pass breakup has been reported in each OTA and minicamp practices with him. Yep. And it sounds like he may have been the only defensive back who had a decent day for at least overall, it sounds like. But yeah, I mean, look, I think we continue to hear the Jair Alexander talk. We continue to hear the Jalen Ramsey talk. We continue to hear that the Cowboys have needs at the cornerback. And I think that, you know, that may still very much be true, obviously, as the rest of the report may indicate. But I think that we shouldn't discount the fact that it does seem like we are getting something out of Kaiir Elam, or at least this is what it would look like if we were going to get something out of Kaiir Elam. You'd start to hear the kind of steady drum beat, and maybe it's enough to hold off the Cowboys from feeling like they need to go out and get a pricey veteran. You know, maybe it feels like maybe they go out there and they can feel more comfortable, you know, vying for someone like Gilmore or you know, a guy that only feel like they need to start for a couple games. So, you know, I think that it's all positive, right? To get any of these down roster cornerbacks to be playing at a high level. So, but I think it's especially positive that it's the guy that, you know, you traded a little bit for, who has a first round pedigree, even if he maybe got overdrafted a little bit. But I mean, has some pedigree to him to maybe finally feel comfortable and maybe to kind of develop finally and feel like he's ready to break out while under your watch, as opposed to whatever happened with the Buffalo.
I'm not shocked, honestly, because he is incredibly talented. Like, that's why he was a first round pick, and he played in the SEC, and he was good in the SEC. I think for Elam, the biggest thing has always been confidence. It seems like when he's confident and he knows what he's doing, he plays really well. But then if he has a bad play or two, it tends to hang around with him a little bit. And I think that's what you saw in the AFC Championship game last year. Sure. Things started to snowball on him. So I think in minicamp, this is a good time to build that confidence. It seems like he's playing really well. Kaiir Elam turning into the expectations are lower here. Turning into an average cornerback would do massive things for this Cowboys defense.
Yeah, I mean, like, the expectations of the team that drafts you in the first round versus the team that, you know, traded a low round pick for you are quite different, right? Yes, and I think living up to the expectation of being a serviceable starting corner, like that's something that you feel like a you know, 3-year vet at this point.
Yeah, he didn't finish his rookie contract this year.
Yeah, so I mean, that's a reasonable goal for a guy who's played significant games in the NFL, but is still a very young player.
So the other cornerback that had a good day, and he'll tell you about it on social media, Israel Mukuamu, who I promised his brother that we would talk about him more. He's been DMing me for a while.
Hey, I'm on board with it. We love Izzy on this show, no doubt.
Yeah, this we're not doing Izzy's brother any favor. We've been fans for a while.
That's right.
One of the things that we thought was that Mukuamu was going to potentially compete for a slot job, and maybe he still is.
Mm-hmm.
But it sure seems like the Cowboys are planning on having Deron Bland as their slot corner to start the year, Kaiir Elam as one of the outside corners, and maybe Izzy Mukuamu on the outside. And it sounds like he performed extremely well there on Monday or Tuesday, excuse me.
I mean, I think it makes some sense if you can get him out there and play him in a kind of a silo situation. Look, he's an outside corner at University of South Carolina. It's not like he was some small school starting corner, you know?
No, and he's productive. He had a bunch of
clearly did. And he clearly did it at a high enough level to be drafted at that position. The Cowboys loved his versatility. They moved him inside because they had a need there, and then suddenly the room became too full with safeties, right? And so he kind of got moved around. But every single time that Izzy got onto the field, whether it was as a nickelback, whether it was as a safety, we haven't really seen much of him play on game day outside. But in those two spots, he's performed incredibly well. So in these early days where the OTAs are kind of just feeling this out, we obviously have some injuries that we're trying to work through a little bit. You kind of want to just know what you have in these guys if they're going to be game day rostered. Then seeing what Izzy can do on the outside, he hasn't showed you anything that he can't do it. And I think if you're specific about the kind of coverages that you call. And I think it really lines up quite nicely with the kind of coverages that Eberflus wants to call anyways. I think that Izzy could be a perfectly acceptable guy on the outside, at least until maybe you get some more resources on the outside, and then you allow him to kind of move back inside or just play that kind of versatile inside-outside guy. I have belief in Izzy that he can go out there and be comfortable until he's shown me that he can't, right? And I think that there are certainly spots where I would not feel comfortable. I wouldn't necessarily want him in man everywhere you go situations on the outside where he's having to chase guys across the field. But I think in a situation where he's side saddling up a sideline, where he's keeping his eyes on the quarterback, I think he can absolutely do that. And he adds a physical presence to the outside of your defense, which again is going to be really important when it comes to run defense.
I just keep coming back to any time that the Cowboys have given Mukuamu chances and opportunities, he's always taken full advantage of them. Absolutely. Whether it's on special teams, he's always been great in special teams. Preseason, there's been a couple preseasons where they just play him an ungodly amount of snaps, and every time he plays well. And then I think of the playoff game where they were so desperate at corner, they played him in the slot, and he
was one of the best. He was one of the best defensive backs on the field, for goodness sakes. It was ridiculous.
If you're not quite familiar, you forgot, Izzy Mukuamu is going into year 5 right now. He's only 25, so he's been around a lot. He's been through a lot of different coaching staffs. 6'4" to 8, 212 pounds. He's got an 81-inch wingspan, 34-inch arms. By the way, all those are in the 97th percentile or better. He's a good athlete. I don't think he runs in the low 4.4s or anything like that, but you're talking about a long, physical, athletic guy that will tackle. I don't think he's going to be option number 1 to start at corner, but would I be shocked if he wins the job in training camp and he's opening up week 1 on the outside? Not at all.
I mean, look, it's too bad they didn't give him much of this opportunity last year, because I really felt like in last year's situation, they really could have used him a lot more. And so I felt like they probably needed him elsewhere as well, because it's not like the cornerback room was the only depleted room. No. But I just think that, in a situation where, look, you're going to roster Izzy Mukuamu, might as well see what he can do on the outside. And if he's good enough, there's no reason that he couldn't be your kind of temporary solution while you're waiting for Ravel and Diggs to get healthy again.
And he did play more in the middle of the season. He played 201 snaps on defense, which I'm pretty sure that was the most he's ever played.
Yeah, it was. They definitely increased his play a ton at the end of the year because they had to, right? But they certainly weren't playing him enough outside.
No, and I don't, and maybe he just wasn't a Mike Zimmer fit. Maybe they were banged up. I mean, they had no Bland the first half of the year. Diggs got hurt, but they did have Jordan Lewis. They had other guys that were ahead of him. So maybe that's part of it. I don't know. I want to see more of Izzy Mukuamu because I do think there's something there.
We said, every single time we've seen him on the field, he's played great. Let's just give him more. Let's see what he can do. And I think that's what they're finally doing.
All right, let's talk about a down roster receiver who stood out on Tuesday. We will get to not Jalen Cropper, although he did have a good day. We'll talk about Jonathan Mingo next. This episode is brought to you by Skylight Calendar. Say goodbye to sticky notes, scribbled plans on the fridge, and overlapping calendar invites. The Skylight Calendar is here to bring clarity to the chaos and help families stay organized without the stress. This sleek digital display syncs with your existing calendars, whether that's Google, Apple, Outlook, and more, making it simple to track appointments, practices, dinners, and reminders in all one easy to see place. Listen, my life is crazy right now. My daughter's in T-ball. My wife's doing a bunch of different activities outside of her work. I'm doing stuff. But with our new Skylight Calendar, it's made it so easy to visualize what we have going on every single day. And right now, Skylight is offering our listeners $30 off their 15-inch calendars by going to skylightcal.com/NFL. Go to skylightcal.com/NFL for $30 off your 15-inch calendar. That is skylightcal.com/NFL. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Scouting Show. As training camps get closer and moves are being made, host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. All right, a couple wide receiver notes. You want to start with Jalen Cropper or no?
No, let's start with Mingo.
Okay, Jalen Cropper, I guess, had a big day, but all that means is it's June. We shouldn't pay too much attention to that. It does sound like Jonathan Mingo had a really good day at practice.
Yeah.
I believe he hauled in all 6 of his targets. Mingo's a tough one to figure out because the Cowboys traded for him midseason, and then he never really got to play with Dak Prescott. Yeah. I think Dak got hurt maybe the week they traded for him. So I just don't know what to expect. Honestly, I'm not expecting anything, and anything he gives the Cowboys feels like a bonus.
If you did a cut up of his 2024 targets with Cooper Rush, it would pair well with a theme song of Keystone Cops or something. It's just like it's like folly. It's seriously, there's so many different times when I felt like last season that I looked up and Jonathan Mingo was getting a target where Cooper Rush was being half tackled as he threw the ball, or, it was like so wildly off target that you just didn't feel like you ever, and he got so few targets that you just never really got a feel for how he was playing. But obviously the numbers weren't great, cause I think he was ended up converting, something like 25% of his targets. Just like, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I mean, it just was ugly. Right. And it was just, and it looked very similar to the numbers that you heard about, him producing in Carolina. Mm-hmm. But you kept hearing folks talk about him all the time. Like you kept on hearing about the coaching staff talking about how they were excited about it. And part of it was like, I'm sure they're just promoting their guys and they're just trying to deflect as we were going through the wide receiver 2 situation and trying to figure out who that was and try to, offer him up as an option there. But I do think that there was something there as well. And now we're seeing that he's out here and he's playing well. He's catching the ball a lot and he's showing out. So, I think, again, one of the benefits of going out and getting Pickens is you slot everybody down a level, mm-hmm. and it just makes things more appropriate for their talent levels. And maybe this is just going to help Mingo in his development a little bit, even if it takes away a couple of opportunities for Jalen Moreno-Cropper.
It reminds me of like when the Cowboys went out and traded for Bryce Butler in 2015, I believe. Man, I'm going back. Bryce Butler. So 2015 is the year that Dez got hurt in week 2, right? In week 1. And Dez missed like 6 or 7 games. They trade for Bryce Butler mid-year. He has a couple plays and does a little bit. The following year, Bryce Butler in 2016, he ends up being like the 4th receiver because that's the Dak rookie year. Dez had a pretty decent year. They had Cole Beasley. They had Terrence Williams. And Butler's numbers weren't great, but he was a more effective receiver because he was the number 4 receiver on the offense. Like he filled that role so much better, and you felt good about him in that spot. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case with Jonathan Mingo. Like you just bring this guy in for 12 to 14 plays. He's so much bigger and athletic than everybody else on the field. And yeah, he gets 1 or 2 targets and maybe he cashes in on those targets. Maybe he doesn't, but he's a much better option than what you had last year, where that was Jalen Brooks running those routes.
Yeah, I mean, he's just he's an incredible athlete. I mean, that's the thing. He's explosive. He's big. Like he's bigger than Tolbert, like by probably 20 pounds, and
Maybe
he's more
25.
explosive and fast. Yeah, I mean, 20 it probably is 25,
Yeah.
and he's faster and more explosive. Like
Yeah.
that's the kind of athlete we're talking about. And so I just think that, in a world where we've talked about it before, like, let's find Dak some easy buttons. Let's find Dak like a way to, kind of produce some yardage, be productive without having to kill himself. Having, 4 wide receivers out there and Mingo running a slant route against cornerback 4 of some poor defense, and then just giving him the ball while he's on the move sounds like a really great way to like produce some easy yardage with some of your down roster talent. And I think that's what we're kind of shooting for.
Yeah, and it just improves your overall depth. Like if Tolbert were to go down for a couple weeks because of an ankle sprain, you feel good about Jonathan Mingo being your receiver 3 for a couple of weeks. But last year, because CD was banged up and because they didn't have Pickens and Brandon Cooks missed a lot of time and wasn't the same after the injury, you didn't have that type of depth. You do have that this year where you feel pretty good about your wide receiver unit as a whole, and you even feel good about guys 5, 6, 7, and 8, including Jalen Cropper.
And even a guy like and even for Mingo, like I mean, now he's had a whole offseason to work with Dak, whereas instead of just being thrown into the middle of this whole situation, which again, it was easy for everybody to kind of laugh and write off Mingo because of the failures that happened in Carolina, that sort of thing, and then it didn't look great immediately when he came in here. I think we should give him the opportunity to kind of prove himself this offseason. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
All right, that is it for today's show. We'd like to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Go download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. We will be back on Thursday with more from Dallas Cowboys minicamp. We'll see you then.